So yeah, I think the presentation is visible now. So today we're going to talk about the kind of vegetables and the right vegetables for your environment. And based on that, we're going to plant the garden. So today's seminar will be more of an hands-on approach, and we'll get to know the final touches that we need to make our garden possible. And then we'll also realize the natural inputs. By this, I mean I've covered soil and water until now, but I thought it necessary to use this opportunity to work with sun and the moon. So we'll look at how the sun and moon works for your gardening and how it benefits your garden. And then there's the importance of grounding the plant. So this is a new concept actually. The grounding the plant is like basically how the plant is connected to the earth, even though if it is in the pot. So doesn't matter if your plants are on the terrace or in your windowsill, you can still use the grounding technique. And what is the advantage of grounding a plant? Like, why is it even necessary? How do you ground a plant? So we'll talk about that. And then we'll start with the potted plants, how easily we can do it at home. And then we'll see if you have a backyard, how you can start a backyard, and you can start the gardening there. So these are the topics that we will cover. So, starting with that, choosing the right vegetables to grow. Now that we have learned the basics of the types of seeds and the soil to use, we can now focus on what to grow and when. The basic idea is to grow something you feel the most satisfaction. This can be simple things like coriander leaves, जिसको धनिया कहते हैं हम. You can start with that. Tomatoes, chilies, mint leaves, and tulsi. So these are the basic plants that we usually need in our tea or in our tadka or in our daily routine. So when you start with this, you will get a sort of satisfaction कि हाँ हम रोज हर रोज मनरा की जिंदगी में we are going to get all the items that we need. So coriander leaves mostly are there in all sabjis, in all stews. We use coriander leaves. Tomatoes also most of the time we use. Even in dal we use the tomatoes sometimes. Chilies obviously another good herb to use in the kitchen. And then mint leaves. This is like पुदीना जो कहते हैं ना उसको, वो like that is the leaves that you use in pudina. And tulsi is basically most household homes they have the tulsi. Basically it's in the pot or outside the house. So anyways you can start with that if you don't have a plant to start with. We are going to work on some problems that we can be harmful to the plants, like stray cows. Sometimes, if you have cows roaming around and you have a backyard or something which is not fenced, so you have to take care of this. Sometimes you might think of using the plot outside your gate, so that is not fenced also. So you have to take care of stray cows not eating your plants. And you have to also educate your children to take care of your garden in case your garden is in a playing area. So you have to like, let me just and meet the people that are there. So you have to take care of your garden and tell the kids not to play around where the produce is growing. So this is really important, how you can use this small things, and it will become a good garden. But if you don't take care of these small things, then it will make a havoc in your garden. So just sharing with you what this uh, garden type of things you can sow in this time of August. So I'm just sharing with you if I can get it right. Yeah. So this is the chart that is I found to be very useful. It is basically divided into the type of vegetable you can see. So I'm looking at this. I think you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor here?
No,
Okay, so
ये
I'll just read
दिख
the
रहा है.
serial. Yeah, I can just see the. I'll just read the serial number. So you can see onions are in May and June, right? Bottle gourds are in Feb, March, or in June, July. So whatever you see here is the time that you can start to grow. Where is written North India? If you're located in North India, you can use that column, and if you're located in South India, then you use that column, that particular month to grow that particular vegetable. So for example, in August we have if you're in North India, even in South India, August is a good time, right now this is a good time to grow carrots. So you can see on number 3 it says carrot, August, September, October, and then if you're in South, you are getting from August to November. So these 3 months you can start to see the gestation period. In the last column you can see days to maturity is 75 to 80 days. So that means the moment you start, like you start from tomorrow, for example, growing carrots, right? So it will take 75 to 80 days for it to mature, right? So that means that this carrots can be grown in this time. After that, we have the next thing we can have is broccoli here, number 9, right? And then after that we have August, we have cauliflower also we can grow. And then after that we have in August we have radish. And then in August what we have is, yeah, so basically you can get ready for the September. Like September is a lot of things you can grow in September. You can also grow cauliflower here. You can grow cabbage in September. So August and September, you can start with this carrots, and you can start with cauliflower and broccoli. These are the kind of things you can start with. If you grow something else, it will come out, it will not like the produce will not be as healthy as it's supposed to be. So this is a good indication of what to grow when. So if we follow this, it will be beneficial to us. Like if we grow the onions right now, they might not come out as much as we want. There'll be a lot of leaves on it, and then the onion bulb will be very small. So these are the kind of things that you have to take care of when you are following this. So this table is really neat. It's very precisely designed. It has everything that you need. For example, the depth of the seed, that's the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, fifth, sixth, seventh column. You see the depth of the seed, how deep you should sow the seed, you know and then how the method of sowing, like you transplant. So basically transplantation means you grow in a line many of the seeds close together, and once they are big enough, like 2 to 3 inches, then you transplant them into the pot or into the place that they're going to grow big. So that's called transplantation. Wherever it's written direct, that means that you don't have to move that plant. Once you sow it there, you just let it go until it becomes big. So these are the kind of things that you have to take care of. So this table is really helpful, and I will share this in the group. In fact, I'll just put the link right now. I'll just copy this link, and I'll place it in the messaging box so that you guys can copy it and maybe even click it at your place. So you can see it in your group messages right now. You can click on that link, and you can use that as your guidance, right? And that will help you along your journey towards what to grow and in what location. Like that's really important. Like if you're in the south or in the north, they're based on that, right? Okay, moving on. We talked about natural things that we have to take care of. Now, the sun is one of the things that we did not discuss, right? So, the sun is that place that is so far away, yet it's giving so much to us. All life is dependent on sun. In fact, even the cars that we drive, they are dependent on the sun. How? Because millions of years of sun's rays have come down on this earth. They've evolved these life forms, and those life forms have died and decomposed and gone to the layers of the earth which is below the earth, and now they have turned into coal or oil, and then we are extracting that energy and converting it to petroleum and jet fuel and all these kind of things. So the sun is very, very helpful right now, even in the past and in the future also. It's the source of energy for everything, in short. The planetary formation, to the existence of the planet, everything is dependent on the sun, more so than any other object or any other entity in actuality. But we are just taking it casually. It's the sun, it rises and it sets. But everything is made by the sun. In fact, when the sun will run out of its energy, it will become a red giant, and then it will collapse itself into a dwarf star. So some suns which are larger than the sun, they turn supernova, they explode, and when they explode, they make elements like gold and platinum and all these kind of things. So you're wondering that why there is so little gold around on this earth. It's because not many suns are bigger than this our sun. So when they blast, there are some energies that are created in that blast, and the atoms gain their electrons and their protons, and in that process what happens is the element of heavy elements like gold and platinum all are forged when there is a supernova, when there is a sun which blasts in the past. So these are all the residuals of the past, all the elements that we see, even carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, all these are forged, are formed from dying stars from the past. So that was just a little bit of general knowledge. But for now, what is the sun's importance? Like the sun gives so much of light, and that light only 47% of it is visible light, right? This is what it means. The colors of the rainbow that we see are just this much. After that, 51% of it is invisible to us, and it is mostly felt, like it is felt as warmth or as heat, you know. So that is the infrared light that the sun gives us. And then there's the UV light also, ultraviolet light. Now, this is also not seen by the naked eye. Only the eyes can see this 47% of the spectrum that the sun is giving out. So this is very important because we feel that we can just grow the plants inside our house using lamps. Now, obviously, lamps are just giving visible light, which is 47% of the energy or of the light, right? But compared to the sun, how much are we getting? 100% of the spectrum. You can see there is a 100% spectrum here from the sun, and from that we as plants, the plants are getting only 47% when we are growing it in laboratory conditions. Now obviously this looks good, like these are salads growing inside a conditioned grow area which is lit by artificial light, as you can see, and they are making a lot of profit in here because these can be stacked, like they can be one layer on top of another layer on top of another layer, and they can just grow a lot of things in one small space. But remember what we talked about, microbes and bacteria and viruses, they also start surviving in this environment. Because this environment are controlled, they also have to be given controlled foods, controlled pesticides, and all these things have to be controlled laboratory conditions. Imagine there is a power outage, there is a power outage and everything just goes off. Literally everything, the lights go off, the pumps go off. So this way of farming is very, very dangerous in a way. If you are doing it for like commercial purposes, you have to have backup generators, you have to have all these kind of things in place, backup pumps, backup light, battery storage of electricity. So all these things have to be played into the system to make it run, and that too you will also never get the spectrums that the sun is giving. So we need to focus on what is natural and what is free, and not imitate something. Like naturally, you cannot imitate something. Of course, if you are hurt somewhere or you have to get artificial oxygen in you, that's understandable. But why should we make artificial things when the natural things are already there? You know, today I had an article and I read that article. It's very interesting. Genetically modified corn is welcome. Now, see, what is genetically modified? We had discussed it is when we are controlling the genes or the mapping system of the plants. That is the genetics that they are saying that they are doing, that they are modifying, right? So, this is just today's article. I think it's yesterday, sorry. Yesterday's article, and it's saying that damage to corn or soya crop is becoming more costly as high wind storms intensify in the climate change era. A lot of wind is blowing, right? That is the situation right now because of the global warming. A hot air is rising and then it's creating a void of low pressure, and then the wind is gushing in, and when the wind gushes in, the crops also are sort of swept away. Then these wind speeds are about 160 kilometers per hour. That's really high speed winds. That's like almost a car running at its full speed. So that's the amount of winds that are gushing through and causing billions of dollars of damage across millions of acres of crops. Now, what is the solution that we are doing? Understandably, demand is growing for a crop with shorter, fatter stalks that stands in better chance against high wind storms. So, what this means is that we are creating crops that are actually short in height. Can you imagine? The wind is blowing, so we are creating crops that are short in height, and we are doing that genetically. Now imagine If you are having a shorter height, obviously the roots will also be shorter. What is the purpose of deeper roots and very short height of the stalks? So technically what we are doing is we are inhibiting these plants to grow to their fullest. They have written it here. In fact, look, they are saying that the new GMO varieties is stronger still. Bayer, the company that is designing these things, is modified the corn plant with foreign gene that inhibits the production of plant growth hormone. I'm not even able to pronounce it. Gliberic gliberic acid. You know, this is the acid that is inhibited in the plant growth. So now they are stopping this acid to come out naturally in the plant, and in the process the plant stands dwarfed. And because of that, the corn will come out at its right time. And obviously they are saying the corn produced will be the same amount, but obviously if their roots are not deep enough, because you have inhibited the growth of the plant by by limiting the acid to be produced, of the growth, then what will happen? The roots will not fetch the micronutrients, and we will get a corn which is basically just a fluffy thing, which has a lot of fiber in it maybe, but no nutrients, no minerals, no vitamins. So this is very important. This is just recently that they have launched this, and this company, specially known as Bayer, is the same company that produces the chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So now they're going to seed generation and GMO. So this is the thing that the problem is being created. Big pharmaceutical companies, big seed companies, big fertilizer companies are actually handling how we are supposed to eat and what we are supposed to eat. So it boils down to all these things, that who has to be careful at the end? We have to be careful, because at the end we are the one at the short end of the stick. We will get the produce which is substandard, we will get the produce which has less vitamins and minerals, and then they are always be there to give us the minerals in form of pills or anything like that. So this is the thing. And in fact these companies are not left alone. This is the Department of Justice that they have given a report on this company. They had to pay $40 million to resolve the alleged use of kickbacks and false statements. These companies are making false statements, false accusations on each other and into the public, and they are hiding the data. They are hiding the data. They are they are telling people not to confess, and all these kind of things are happening. And they had to pay 40 million to these kind of people, that they stay silent for the problems that they are actually creating. So we have to be very careful of these big pharmaceutical companies and what they are doing with their GMOs and all these things, that they are inhibiting the gene that is for growth just because of climate change. Of course, we have to address the real big problem, which is climate change. But is this the right way to address climate change, through making the plants shorter? Just because there's a lot of wind growing, you might as well grow trees at the surrounding area and create a microclimate which is beneficial for the plants in the center. Why don't we do that? Why are we planting so big many plantations, and then when the wind comes, oh, the plant is fallen down? So we have to learn new ways of farming, new ways of understanding global warming and fixing that problem. Instead of doing it the fast way, we should do it the smart and the long way. That is what I was trying to say here. So let's not rely on these companies. They are taking over if we don't become alert. And that's the point that I'm trying to say here. By incidentally, this is the same company that creates the Roundup pesticide, which actually is carcinogenic, and it creates and induces cancer within human beings. So the same company that's producing the seeds, are doing the fertilizer, are doing the pharmaceuticals. It's a very vicious circle, actually. Um, let's go to the next now. We are looking at the seasons, how they are made. So it's just a small video that I'd like to share, how the seasons come about. So I'll just play it.
You know that Earth orbits the sun, right? And that it takes a full year for our planet to complete its orbit. Earth also rotates. Earth remains tilted in the same direction all year round as we orbit the sun. But that means the sun's light shines differently on Earth at different times of the year. Let's look at Earth when it's winter in the northern hemisphere. Observe how the North Pole tips away from the sun. This means that sunlight strikes the northern hemisphere at a shallow angle for a short period of time. This is why winter weather is generally cool, with short days and long nights. As Earth orbits the sun, we move towards spring in the northern hemisphere. Now Earth is tilted neither toward nor away from the sun, as day and night are about equal in length. As we make our way to the summer months, notice that Earth is still tilted in the same direction, only now on the other side of our orbit. The North Pole is tipping toward the sun. Sunlight strikes the northern hemisphere more directly, and the sun stays in the sky for a longer time. Compared to winter, summer days are warmer, and the sun stays in the sky much longer. Notice too that while it's summer in the northern hemisphere, it's winter in the southern hemisphere. Because of Earth's tilt, the seasons are reversed.
Okay, this was just a general guide of how the Earth is actually rotating, and when it's winter here, it's summer here, and when the tilt is on the other side, when the Earth is actually moved on the other side of the sun, like it's rotating, the tilt still is the same. So the tilt comes here, and the Earth is nearer to the sun here. So you can see that there is a lot of sun here. So this becomes summer, and the lower part becomes the winter. So we are understanding why the summers and the winters are there, the seasons are there, and when it's almost in the center, like right now, we are having the rains. You know, so if in fact one of the students who have joined is from East Africa, so he can vouch for it that when we are at the equator, there is sun and there is rain. There is sun and there is rain. There's no such thing as the seasons. You know, so basically, I was like born in East Africa in Kenya. When we are there, we have the long rains and the short rains, but basically when it gets so high in humus, it starts to rain. It's just like you are living in a hill station area. You know, when there is a little bit of high sunshine, then it rains quickly because the equator is running exactly at the center of the earth, so the tilt of the earth does not matter much. But like for us who are in India right now, we are in the northern hemisphere. So right now we are going to have the, after the rains we're going to have this winters, and that is because the earth is tilting away from the sun, right? Because if the sun is here and the tilt is towards that, then the sun is not hitting the rays as it much as is hitting the southern part of the tilt. So it's really interesting how the seasons work, and we also need to understand what to plant when, and that's why the table that I showed you before is necessary to follow. Because if we plant anything at any time, the seasons will affect that plant growth, and the seasons will affect the sunshine, and the seasons will affect the way the water is absorbed, you know, in the system. So the plants will give you the wrong fruit or the not the beneficial fruit that you desire. So let's just move on to the next natural item that is very interesting. Now, moon and plants. This is very interesting. This is the thing that is actually skipped by most farmers, but it was actually followed in the past. Okay, so the principle behind the lunar phase gardening is fairly simple. When the moon is waxing, like changing from the new moon to the full, if the time is right for planting seeds that yield above the ground. Okay, so basically when it's changing from the new moon, right, to the full, so you can see the circle is actually going this way. You can see this arrow is going that way. So the moon changes the phases like this. So when it's going from new moon to the full moon, that's when you plant the seeds that yield fruit above the ground, right? That's when you sow the seeds. When the moon has passed the full moon and is diminishing, so when it's past the full moon and it's diminishing, that's when you plant the root crops. This is very interesting. Root crops are supposed to be planted like at this time. You start planting it, and then you finish it off with a new moon. Like you start planting when it's full moon, when you want to go to the roots, and you start planting on the new moon when you want fruits outside, like vegetables like brinjal and beans and all these kind of things you can plant on the new moon. So when is the new moon coming up? Obviously, this is very easy to follow. If you're an Indian country, they have this special calendar, and even there are apps for this. There's like lunar calendar, and we always follow the zodiac signs, and they are based on the moon. So lunar calendar is followed in India very easily. We always have these month names: Savan, Badar, you know, summer times and winters, and all these things have their names according to the moon. So it's very easy for us if we just keep a eye on it. For other places, you have obviously you can use the apps that are out there. You can just Google what is the phase of the moon today, and it will give you the phase of the moon. You know, you can just follow a calendar, a lunar calendar online, and you will be able to understand where to grow and when to grow. I will just go into detail into this thing because it's really important. So if we look at the full moon, it's about 357,000. So this was the least amount of distance. So it is the nearest when it is the full moon. So when we are looking at this diagram again, we can see that when the full moon is the nearest to the earth, that means the gravity of the moon is affecting the earth most, because the moon itself is a body. It has a gravitational force of its own, and it is nearest to the earth at that time. So the water level inside the sea, everywhere that it is affected the highest. So we can think that when we are planting something, the water stays on top of the soil, because the new moon is attracting, because the new moon is the nearest to the earth. You see how it works here. And when it is the new moon, like when it is the new moon here, it is the furthest away. It is the furthest away. So which gravity works at that time? The earth's gravity works at that time. So the water goes down at the root level. When the trees or the plant have gone the roots deeper, that's when the new moon also helps the water to go down. So if you look at this chart again, we'll just look at this chart. See if I can show you the chart clearly. So according to this diagram we are showing, just before it starts to become a new moon, right? We are planting the seeds. When the moon is just about to go out, we are planting the seeds at that time. And at that time, we know that the gravity of the moon is at the furthest. The moon is the furthest, so gravity of the earth is the strongest. And then when the moon is nearing by and it turns to the full moon, by that time 7 and 7 days, it approximately takes about 14 days, and you have planted it 2 days before. So about 16 days, you will see the shoots have come out, and the shoots have come out, and the water stays on top of the soil, because the shoots have come out and you have planted it just before the new moon, right? So when the full moon comes out, the shoots are still getting the water stays on top. So this is how the trick is of helping the moon affect your growth levels. And then you can see after that you do the transplantation. So you the full moon, you transplant your plants. Anytime you see that, like obviously you cannot transplant the plants on full moon unless you have sown them 2 days before the new moon. So you have to get this calendar particularly right for the first time you're gardening. And you have to also understand a new moon will always appear after 28 days. So you don't have to worry so much. Maximum you have to just get it right is, you might be in the middle and you might be lucky, so you can just start very quickly. But even if you are right now, for example, in the full moon, you'll just have to wait for 15 more days for the new moon to appear. So this is really interesting, and I will share this jpg file in the group so you can follow it, and you can just maybe just take a printout of it and just see when to plant. And I mean, if you do it once, right, it just get into your head. Like basically you will just look at the moon and you'll know this is the right time to water, and this is the right time to cut the harvest or to leave it. Like even if you leave it for 7 days, sometimes what happens is the farmers don't know when to harvest. For example, if the wheat is grown in your farm and you harvest it on the new moon, like when you harvest it on the new moon, you will get a harvest which is 20% more. Will not have the water content in them. I'll just say it again. Wheat goes bad because there is water content inside the wheat, you know. And if that water content is reduced, the minimum is kept there, then the grain which is on top will actually stay healthy if you harvest on the new moons. Like if the harvest time is on the new moons, then you will have a harvest which is 20% more. You know, it will, in the sense, it will not go bad. But if you harvest on a full moon, like for example, the full moon is there, the moon is near the earth, and the water is raised up, and you are harvesting on that day, what happens is there is a lot of water content in the seeds, because the moon is attracting the water. And when the moon is attracting the water, what happens is the seeds will have a high amount of water in it, that is giving rise to the small insects, airborne insects, and all these kind of things will happen, and they'll eat away into your crop produce. So never harvest during the full moon time. This is the hint for that. Always harvest near the new moon time. That is that is the best way to increase your own profits 20 to 30%. And this is not just facts and figures that are just brought up by I'm saying these are, really done research. Simple things. If they don't have a water, it will not have the insects, airborne insects. It's so simple to understand even. So these are the small things that you need to take care of when you're planting your garden also. And also harvesting. I mean, the way I see it, it's really more important in the harvest time to harvest when the moon is at the furthest, when it's really far from you, which is the new moon time, which is it's actually in a blackish color. It's very easy to remember. When it's blackish in color, it's time to harvest. Yeah, or you get ready to harvest basically at that time. And then this is the grounding. Now earthing or grounding is called, and it's very a new concept. And this is something for people who are living in apartments or who don't have access to the, to the land. Um, uh, this this technique is very interesting, in the sense it's linked to natural normalization. Like the earth, even the lightning, when it happens, it strikes the earth. So the earth is the one which basically absorbs all the electrons and keeps it within itself. And any excess electrons, like even we are wearing shoes, some people who are down to earth, who are farmers, or who are living on the lower end of the pay scale or something like that, they are always connected with the grounds. But the moment we get a little bit of money, the moment we have a little bit of wealth, we start wearing shoes, we start wearing socks, we insulate ourselves from the earth, literally 1 or 2 inches above the earth we are walking, and we are not connected with the ground. And from this simple example, you can see, by the way, there is a movie I will share in the group. It's called Grounding. And this movie is really important if you are having chronic inflammation in your body. That means you always feel a sort of reddishness in your skin or a burning sensation. Then grounding will help you a lot. So that movie is it's on YouTube. Basically, you can look for it. I'll just share the link with you also. So the same principle applies to plants. And these potted plants, you can see these are glass pots here, this and this. But the difference is there is a wire connected to this pot, and that wire is connected to the earth. Like you can see, this wire is going. This wire is connected to the earth pin here. It's just one single wire. Now I'm just making a very bold statement. Never use this without understanding it properly. It is connected to the earth pin. It's not connected to the live nor the neutral. If you make this mistake, you will actually get electrocuted. So this is very important. I will post a video on this, how to make this yourself at home. And basically the earth pin is mostly is the longer pin or the bigger pin of all the 3 pins. You can just remember it like that. And sometimes appliances just have 2 pins. They don't require the third pin, or the earth pin. So those are the 2 pins you are supposed to avoid when you're grounding. You are supposed to go to the third pin, the above that, which is in the bigger position or the higher position. And that is the one wire which is connected to this pot. And you can see how this flower is actually growing faster. You can see here, and is actually having more flower. Like these are 3 flowers here, and there is just one flower here. So this is a simple way of understanding. If you are growing your pots in a terrace or in a inside the house or something like that, if you ground them, right? Like, and first of all, your house have to be having the earth also. So you have to check that. I will show you in this video which I'll make tomorrow. I will show you how to check if your house is grounded. And if your house is grounded, you can use the grounding of the house to ground your plants also. And when you ground your plants, you will actually connect to them through the earth. And the earth will also, you can also touch the plants, and you can de-ionize yourself like that. Like when you touch the grass, or when you touch your feet to the grass, it's the same as when you touch these plants, because all the excess electrons in you will travel to you. Like earth is actually having excess of electrons, and it will travel towards you, right? So, and if you are having excess, it will normalize and it will go towards the earth. So this is a normalization act that happens, and it's very important for plants or any living things to get this earthing or grounding done. So this is just a small experiment that shows that if you are grounding your plants, you will have a higher produce or a higher yield, or a better growth, basically better foliage, better growth. So this is particular for people who are living in apartments, or who are trying to grow their plants in the pots. It's not necessarily this thing to be done if you are growing on the ground already. So that is already grounded. So you don't need to do this at that point. Yeah. Okay. We have a couple of videos to go. This is the video that is, she is actually mentioning how the grounding works. So I'll just play it.
Right now, so I'm going to push the button. It went beep, and that's the battery, and then it went to a yellow saying you're not grounded. And when I am grounded, it should show a green light and have a tone. Okay, so I'm not grounded, and let's test if this plant in a pot will ground me. So that's the chirp, and now I'm not grounded, and I'm touching the plant. And even when I stick my fingers down into the soil, sadly, I know that soil is from the earth, and this plant could grow on the earth grounded, but just like us, when it's not touching the crust of the earth or using a grounding tool, then it isn't grounded. It's not, it's encased in this plastic pot. Even if you had a metal pot, even if you had terracotta or something that's actually conductive, it's not touching the earth. So just like we're conductive, every cell in my body is conductive. I'm made out of conductive material, and so are you. But when we're not touching the earth, there's nothing to conduct. We're not plugged into the earth, so we're not reaping the health benefits. Same with this potted plant. So now though, when a patient emails me asking, am I grounded when I touch a plant? I can say, you can be. That is a fantastic way to ground, because there's grounding stakes for your indoor plants. So a lot of people, I think these started coming around because people just wanted to enhance the health of their potted plants, right? If they're going to last longer, as we showed in the grounded and again in Heal for Free, plants respond vibrantly. It's natural for them to be growing out of the earth. So when you ground them, they grow fuller, blooms last longer, they're more vibrant. They're healthier just like we are. We're healthier, and all the medical studies show how healthy and how quickly we respond to touching the earth, and same with plants. So these grounding plant stakes can help the health of your plant, but I want to give you the tip that it can also help your health, because when I ground this plant, then when I touch any leaf on this plant or the soil itself, or say I had a bucket of soil and I made it moist and I put this stake into it, now that soil is conductive. So yes, now I can rest my feet in that bucket and I'm grounded as if I'm outside barefoot. Now I can just, well, let's say you have a little herb garden in your kitchen windowsill and you ground that herb garden when you're cooking, and you pick your fresh herbs to put into your cooking. When you're touching that plant, you're grounded for that brief moment. And as I've repeatedly demonstrated, even a brief moment has instantaneous health benefits. So if you're just watching TV and you just, or as you're walking by, going up the steps, you touch a plant that's grounded, for that moment, you're making a difference in your health. It's literally as simple as a ground stake going into the plant. I'm not grounded, now I am. Not grounded, now I am. And not only is this for my health benefit, but even when I'm not touching this plant, this plant itself is going to grow better. So I'm providing, just like I want to do with my children, just like I want to do with myself, just like I want to do with my pets, I'm now providing this plant a chance to be grounded and connected to the earth. And as a result, I can reap the benefits too, because I live with this plant and I'm in my office and I can touch it whenever I want to be grounded. So now you know, yes, you can be grounded by a bucket of dirt. Yes, you can be grounded by growing a patch of grass indoors, yes, you can be grounded by touching your potted plant if you simply ground it with a very, very simple grounding plant stake. All right, that's your tip for today. I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much.
Okay, once again, tools and tips that are important in some ways. I hope they will also benefit you. I think personally, because this thing is true, because whenever we grow the tulsi plant, the potted tulsi looks different from the tulsi plant that is outside in the wild. So that is definitely true. No matter how big you use the pot, the tulsi tree never looks as vibrant or as big as it's supposed to be when it's growing outside. I mean, the tulsi is actually so as a tree, you know, the it can grow as big as a tree, but we just miniaturized it and put it in the pot and say, okay, this is a tulsi tree. It's not a plant, it's actually a tree, but we just limit its growth, or we limit its conditions, and we don't get it connected to the earth, and that's how we are getting the limitations of the plant. So we need to take care of this. And if we can, and I'll just show you in the video I'll make tomorrow of how to make a grounding stick, and you can just use simple household items to do it. You don't have to go to this fancy copper stick that they're using. You can just use some copper wire in it, and I'll just show you how to do it very easily at home also. I want to show you of how to start with the containers gardens. So in case we run out of time, because this is a video which is long in itself, so in case we run out of time, I will just post the next video and then we will just end the session there. We can always have the questions asked in the group if you want. People who are joining new here, this is the fourth session, and recordings can be gotten for the ones we had previously done. And in case we do run out of time, I will just play the next video quickly, because that is the only one which is left. The container garden is there, and then the ones which are based on the lawn or in the backyard. So we'll just start with this, how to use your gardens in the potted way.
The first step is to choose the location for your container garden. The most important thing to remember is that we can't grow anything without sunlight. Pay attention to how much sunlight that area receives. Ideally, it gets at least 6 to 8 hours of sunlight each day. If you have a choice, choose an area that receives morning sun. Hopefully, there's easy access to water in that location as well. The next step is to decide what you're going to plant. Make a list of things you would like to grow. Start with things you like to eat. Maybe try a few new things too. Once you have your list of things you'd like to grow, find a planting guide for your area. Look at the planting guide and find out what can be planted right now. Evaluate the space you have available. Make sure you have enough room to grow the selected plants. Take time to learn about each of the plants you'd like to grow and find out if it needs to be planted from seed or transplants. Head to your local nursery or favorite online retailer and pick up those seeds and transplants. The next step is to choose your container, and there are two important things to consider when choosing your container. The size of a plant is limited by how large the container is, and it's important to grow the right plant in the right size pot. Here are a few guidelines for what size pots different plants need. The next thing to consider for your containers is to make sure that they have drainage holes. The hole allows excess water to drain out of the container. Roots need air as well as water in order to breathe. Too much water will suffocate and drown those roots. If the container you're growing on is on a hard surface, lift that container up with pot feet. If your container is on soil or grass, that water is going to be able to seep out no problem. The next step for container gardening is to fill that container with soil. Regular soil is too heavy for containers and doesn't provide the roots the air and water that they need to grow well. Look for a quality, raised bed mix, or potting soil, it should be light, fluffy, and drain well. Look for a combination of compost, coconut coir, and vermiculite or perlite. The right mixture of ingredients provides nutrients, air, and water for the roots and gives your plants the best chance for success. Put your pots in place and fill them all the way up with soil. You don't need to add any filler to the bottom. The more soil, nutrients, and water available to your plants, the better. If you're going to add an olla to your container, now is the time to do it. An olla is a clay vessel that is buried underground and filled with water. That water gradually seeps out as needed by the roots. Ollas are by far my favorite way to water containers. The next step is to plant your seeds and transplants in your containers. And as you do this, there are 3 things to keep in mind. The first thing is spacing. Adequate spacing is crucial for growing plants. Plants that are too close together often crowd each other out and compete for sunlight, available nutrients, and often lead to pests and diseases. Use the spacing guidelines on the backs of seed packets or on your transplants as a guide to give your plants enough room. When planting transplants, it's important to plant them at the same level of the nursery pot. Carefully remove that plant from the pot, dig a hole the same depth, and put it in right at the same level. An exception to this would be plants like tomatoes. They're often buried much deeper, and roots will grow along that stem. When you're planting seeds, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. Typically, plant the seed 2 times the depth. Once you start watering seeds, it's important to keep watering them until they germinate. Let's talk for a minute about watering your containers. When plants are grown in containers, the plant's roots can't seek out water like they can if they're grown in the ground. Plants are dependent upon you for water. Many problems in the garden can be traced back to incorrect watering, either too much water or not enough water. When you first plant seeds or transplant, they're going to need watered a little bit more often until those seeds germinate and those transplants get established. How often should you water your containers? The answer is however often they need water. So how do you know if they need watering? The best way to tell is to pull back the mulch and stick your finger in about an inch or so and see if it is dry. If it's dry, it needs water. If it's still moist, then they don't need water. Droopy, wilted leaves are a sign that you waited too long to water. When you're watering, be careful to water the soil, not the plant. The plant's roots absorb the water in the soil, and then the roots then pass that water up through the stem and into the leaves. Adding a 1 to 2 inch layer of mulch in your containers helps slow evaporation and keeps that moisture in the container. Plants grown in containers will often need to be watered more often than plants grown in raised beds or in the ground. I like to use a shower attachment and drench that entire container until you can see water coming out that drain hole. Then you know you have watered that container enough. Deep watering encourages the plant's roots to grow nice and deep. Shallow watering keeps those plants' roots right at the surface, and they will need more frequent watering and be more susceptible to stress damage. Another consideration when you're growing plants in containers, they will need to be fed more often. When the water drains out the whole of the container, it's taking a lot of nutrients with it, and we need to add those nutrients back in. Compost-rich potting soil will provide some nutrients for the first few weeks, and then after that, I like to use a water-soluble organic fertilizer like fish emulsion or liquid seaweed, or a combination of both. Follow the dilution instructions and use it as a soil drench on your container plants. It's important to spend some time in your garden every day. Make it a habit to spend a few minutes looking at your plants. Check that your plants' water needs are getting met. Check the undersides of leaves for pests. Spending time in your garden helps you catch problems when they're small. When you spend time in your garden, you'll notice the little things like new growth and new blossoms forming. The next step in container gardening is to harvest what you're growing. Learn about the plants that you're growing and find out the ideal time to harvest that particular crop. Typically, the best time to pick is when the crops are young and tender. Picking often encourages the plant to keep producing more of whatever it is they're growing. Fruit and vegetables left too long on the plant often become woody and fibrous and don't taste as good. Harvest and eat what you're growing in your garden. And finally, the last step is to learn from your experience. Gardening can take a lifetime to learn. Each time you grow something, you will learn a little bit more. Take notes about when you planted, what you planted, and how it did. Documenting your journey helps you learn. Mistakes are often the best teacher. Starting a garden can feel overwhelming, but starting a garden in containers can be simple. Find a container and get planting. Thank you so much for watching.
Okay, this was a small demonstration of how we can use the containers to do the gardening. If you ask me, this is a very straightforward and easy way to do the gardening. She mentioned about the water oyas, and now what you can use instead of that is you can just use a
The first
pot,
step
like for example, this were the water oyas that she used, and she filled them up with water, and basically what it happens is just evaporates the water slowly. So you can see that the water oyas are here. That is the water oya in the middle, and it is basically just a flask which is made of clay, and which is emit osmosis, it's just removing its water content outside as to balance itself from the outside dryness. So it's just like a pot which is working as an osmosis, and it's just removing the water as the plant needs it. So this is the best way to grow a plant with a pot. If you have a big plot, I mean, if you have earth buckets, we discussed about earth buckets, is just the similar way, I mean, it's it's more efficient to use the earth bucket, if you ask me, because the earth bucket, the water is spaced differently, and because of that, it's like efficient, that's the thing, that it's more efficient to use an earth bucket than to use this, because this amount of area will be left out. You will not be able to grow whatever the amount of pot of water is there, and it will be left out. So I'm just looking at where I placed that slide. I think it was in the beginning, maybe. Yeah, here it is. So this design is basically easier because this lower portion actually saves the water. So this is more efficient if you're using potted plants and you need to water them automatically. And then she mentioned about the the way to harvest, and then she also mentioned about when to harvest. Like if you leave it too long on the plants, it will get fibrous and it will get hard, so you need to take care of that when you're harvesting. And also, now let's look at the video where we can use the plot of land in which we are having, if like we have a very big backyard or something that is ground which is very big, and we are not having to live in a terrace, or we are not living to grow the plants in our apartments, and if you have something which is at the ground level. So let's watch that video. And this video is almost, I think, about 15 minutes, so we'll go above our time schedule again, and I'll quickly end after that, because we'll again take up some time, but this is also important, so I'll just start the video quickly. You'll have to increase the volume for this. I think it's very less.
Where do I begin? What should I plant? Will I even get a harvest? Well, look, whether you're adding to your garden this growing season or you're a complete novice and starting your very first garden, I hope that this video should provide you with a little bit of inspiration to get started. Hi, I'm Ben, and today we're going to install a new vegetable bed together. We're going to get it planted, and I'll be sharing some tips to get you through those first nail-biting months. Don't worry, your new veggie garden is going to look fantastic. So today I'm going to add another one of these beds here. This is about 3 foot, or slightly over 3 foot by 4 foot, or 100 by 120 centimetres. It's a pallet collar bed, so it's instant and it comes ready-made like this, and it fits in with what I've already got here. It gives those nice pleasing lines of symmetry and just adds to the order of it all. Now, why raised beds? Why bother with them? Let me show you why. So the whole point of a raised bed is that it raises the surface area above the surrounding ground level, and what that does, it means it drains through a lot quicker, so the growing medium inside dries out quicker. And after a long wet winter, that's really valuable because drier soil in the spring tends to warm up a lot quicker, giving you a head start on sowing in the colder ground down here. So to get our raised bed in place, you will need a raised bed or materials to make one with. You'll need some cardboard. You'll need a growing medium to fill up your bed, and of course a wheelbarrow to transport it. Some tools, and of course our plants and seeds. The bed we're installing today is a pallet collar bed, which can be sourced very cheaply indeed. But if you want a different size bed, perhaps one that's a bit longer for example, it's very easy to make your own from lumber. As you'll be growing edibles in the bed, use untreated natural wood, as you don't want any nasty chemicals leaching into the soil. If you want to make your own bed like this, use wood that's at least 1 inch or preferably 2 inches, that's 5 centimetres thick. This will give a really solid, long-lasting bed. Just drill pilot holes close to the end of each plank and into the adjoining plank, then screw together using long screws to ensure a properly secured finish. Overlap the planks like this, one over the other all the way around. So the bed is adding on to the end of this row here. It does get a fair amount of sunshine, but it also has a fair amount of dappled shade too. That's fine. Ideally, you want to put beds where they get as much sunshine as possible, at least 6 hours, 8 hours ideally. But never mind, if you do have quite a shady spot, you can at least grow some leafy crops and salads, many of which we'll be planting today, in fact. I'm on a bit of a slope here, so I'm going to dig this bed into the slope so it's nice and level so the water doesn't run off. A bit of a slope's fine, but too much and it gets a bit problematic. You can either build up the soil on the underside to lift it up level, or dig it in like I'm about to now. So I marked out the position of the bed with canes pushed into the corners just so I know where I'm digging, and then I can start work. This is actually quite a quick project. I reckon the digging in takes about 15 minutes, and then putting in the growing medium and planting, I reckon you can get this done within 1 hour. I honestly do. It's a lovely project. You could even get it done in your lunch break maybe. Very satisfying. That's it dug out, I think, to the best of my ability. I'm just going to check the levels now. If you don't have a spirit level, then little tip, you can actually download for free spirit level apps to your phone and use that instead. So I've dug it in as best I can, but I'm a little bit out of breath, so I'm going for a combination. I'm just shoring up the front of it here with some material to raise this side up so it is nice and level, which it is now, and then I'll use some of this excavated material back around the edges to firm the bed in. To help suppress the weeds, I'm going to put a layer of cardboard down. This acts as a barrier. It makes it much harder for the weeds to get through. To be honest, with the grass here, you could just dump the growing medium on top, having given it a really close crop, but I just like to be on the safe side and use cardboard. When you're using cardboard, I think I've mentioned this before, do make sure it's plain cardboard, not glossy cardboard. It's fine if it's got a bit of printing and writing on it, because those are usually made from organic plant-based dyes, but you don't want that glossy stuff because that's just bits of plastic really, and that'll come off. Get a really good overlap so that the weeds don't get a chance to poke through, and just make sure it's quite damp. It's going to be raining a lot later on this week, so I don't think I'll need to wet this down or anything, but if you are in a dry climate, give it a good soak to thoroughly wet it through. Now this will take about 2 months or so to rot down, and by that time all of this grass at least will have died off, and if you've got perennial weeds they'll be severely weakened, and then you've got to get through all that growing medium on top, so it really does give you a competitive edge. Some people use that sort of weed suppressing membrane like Mypex, made from sort of plastics and so on. I'm not keen on that for obvious reasons. Try and use to use less plastic, and why not use waste materials you've got to hand anyhow. Just make sure you remove any staples and bits of tape so it's just clean stuff. The beauty of starting a raised bed is there's no digging involved. It's the plug and play way to get growing. You simply pop your bed in, fill it with your growing medium, plant it, and you're away. Let's fill ours. No, I'm not starting a fire here, I'm just filling my bed, or starting to fill it, with what I've got around. Filling your bed can get quite expensive, especially if you're using bought-in all-purpose potting mix. It's pricey stuff, so start filling the bed with what you've got to hand. I've got these bits of prunings here. They've been lying around for about a year, so they're quite dry. I'm going to break them up by stabbing them down and spread them all out. And those will rot down. They'll act a bit like slow release fertilizer, slowly breaking down and adding their nutrients into the rest of the growing medium. You've got a few options when it comes to filling your bed with the rest of your growing medium. You could use well-rotted manure, that works well, green waste compost, topsoil, special topsoil you buy in, or indeed your own garden compost. I've used in the past green waste compost, which is compost made from collected garden waste that the council collects. The trouble is I found it contains lots of bits of plastic and glass and other debris. It's fine, I've used it to fill most of these beds and I just fish these bits out as I come across them. But this time I decided to opt for mushroom compost. Mushroom compost, as the name implies, is compost that was used to grow mushrooms, but it's still got loads of good life in it, and it's really great stuff. So I bought it in by the bulk bag, and let's get it into our beds. When you're filling any bed, you want to really get the compost in there, right into the corners and edges, and don't be afraid to really pack it in. You can actually stand on it and press it in. You want it nice and firm so the roots have plenty to go on, and that way, you know, once you've squashed it down, you might need to go back and get another load. I started my first vegetable garden when I was about 10 years old, and it was quite a small plot, and I dug it all over with a little hand trowel. It took absolutely ages. It took a couple of weeks, I think, but it was thoroughly enjoyable. But if I'd have known about this no-dig, no-till technique then, it would have saved so much effort, I tell you. This is just so quick, so easy, and so instantaneous with the results. What I love about it is that you're starting with a really clean surface, so there's going to be no weed seeds in here. It's just going to give you such an easier start. So because I said the mushroom compost here is a bit lumpy and I'll be sowing as well as planting into this, I want to finish with just a thin layer of slightly finer material. So I'm going to open this bag of all-purpose potting mix and just add that over. If you have just one bed to fill, then you might find it more economical to fill the bottom of the bed with just your garden soil and top up with a couple of bags like this, rather than getting in a whole load of it. But if you're doing more than, say, 2 beds, I think it's definitely worth getting a bulk bag of compost in, because it works out a lot cheaper per unit volume. There we are, it's looking beautiful. Never mind growing your food in it, you could eat your food off this. It's so clean and lovely. And now the most exciting part, planting, of course. I've got some plants that I started off in these plug trays here, which are ready to plant out. I sowed them in the greenhouse. If you want, you can buy plug plants. They're readily available in garden centres and plant nurseries, and especially in spring at this time of year. These have got a nice little root system and they're ready to go out. So I'm starting with these salad onions or spring onions or scallions, and I'm just going to pop them in. I've sown them in little clusters, so there's sort of between 3 and 5 plants in one little group. So I'll space them about, I don't know, 4 to 6 inches, that's 10 to 15 centimetres apart each clump. And they'll form little ready to go clumps of salad onions, lovely stuff. And then next up I've got these radishes here, again sown in little clusters, and some lettuce. That's everything planted. I've got lettuces here, and I've sort of poked in between these radishes, which will really grow very quickly, and they'll be out before the lettuces fill out and need the space. Now I've got 2 things to sow. I'm going to grow some peas, specifically for shoots to cut as leaves, and some beets or beetroot as well. A really narrow bed like this, you can kind of eyeball it, or you can just use a cane to get a rough kind of straight row like that. And then I'll put my pea shoots over at the edge here, and then just use a fork or trowel just to get down about, what, just under ½ an inch or a centimetre like that. So let's get our beets in, or beetroot. These are nice knobbly seeds. They're very satisfying to sow because you can see them quite clearly. And I'm just going to space them about a couple of inches apart along the row, and they'll come up and I'll probably have to thin them a bit, but that's absolutely fine. Beetroot seeds are actually like a seed head, like a cluster of seeds. So you often get 2 or even 3 seedlings pop up for each seed. So you know that you're getting good value, I suppose, when you see these knobbly old seeds here. Now I'm sowing the peas. I've made a slightly wider drill here and like a little trench, and I'm putting them a bit closer because these are just going to be grown for shoots. This seed's almost past its use by date, so I'm just cramming the last of the packet in here really, because I've got some fresh for actual peas later on, and cover them all up. Great. I'm going to give it a quick water because although it's going to be wet, I just want to get it off to a good start because the compost is quite dry. Wakes the seeds up. Let me just take a moment to show you how this is now looking on my garden plan. So you can see the extra bed I've added in just here to my plan. Zoom in a bit so you can see it more clearly. There we go. You won't find this garden planner in the App Store, so I will pop a link to where you can find it in the video description below. These should all grow really quickly at this time of year. In fact, I grew a very similar bed of salads and roots last spring, and I was picking them within about 4 to 6 weeks after planting them as plugs. I'd really recommend planting a bed of fast-growing salads like this because it really gets you motivated and encouraged for further plantings. This bed and the next make great use of space, with corn underplanted with lettuce, which will be harvested long before the corn grows taller and fills out. There's also a sprawling squash in there to weave among the corn, then out onto the path. This is a great example of a bed devoted solely to leafy salads, including Asian greens like mizuna, while this bed is host to beets, or beetroot, kohlrabi and dwarf beans. There are so many options. That's the really thrilling thing about all of this. The final step, and this is really optional, is to cover our newly sown bed with a bit of fleece. These have been cosseted in the greenhouse, so they're used to the warmth. So this will just help them make the transfer. It's still very early spring here, and although these are cold season crops and perfectly hardy, I just reckon they'll get a better start with a bit of a cover over them. If I'm honest, I think probably the main reason, aside from the slight chill, is also the pests early in spring. There's a lot of pigeons in my garden. They've decimated the brassicas, and my very cute but very annoying dog Rosie as well. She's often sniffing around here, and there's also a cat as well. So there's everything out to dig up our perfectly clean beds. So this will just keep them off. I'm weighing it down so the wind can't get in underneath and blow it off, and I'll probably just keep it here for 2 to 3 weeks until the plants have sort of settled down and got a little bit bigger and can kind of better fend for themselves. That's it, that'll do the job. I've started off a new raised bed today, but of course there's no reason that you have to do a raised bed. You could just start them off straight in the ground, and if you want to do that, just plonk your organic matter like well-rotted compost or manure directly on top of the soil about a couple of inches or 5 centimetres deep, then plant straight into that. It's absolutely fine to have a new vegetable bed standing as like an island, perhaps in amongst lawn all around it. But if you've got lots of these beds, like I've got in my vegetable garden here, then you're going to need paths in between them. So for my paths, I like to use wood chips, and I just lay them again on a weed smothering layer of cardboard and just spread them out. Now, I love wood chips because they don't need mowing, and getting the lawnmower in between these beds would be a little bit fiddly. And as they rot down, they feed the soil. Now you might think, well, what's the point in that? You're not growing anything in here. But it feeds the whole soil of this whole area and contributes to the ecology of it. So you've got the nutrients going down here, and you'll get the roots of sort of bigger, more vigorous plants like squash getting in there, and that will give them a further boost. Plus, this is really beautiful material for all sorts of beneficial bugs, like those beautiful ground beetles that help to keep the slug population down. Yes, it does need topping up from time to time, but it's a lovely material to work with. It's clean, it smells gorgeous, and it keeps your feet nice and clean as well. Or if you want to do your beds just directly on the grass but without the raised beds, then you can just put down your cardboard and then put a nice thick layer of your compost or other organic matter like we did with our raised bed. To make it easier though, you could just temporarily hem in the sides with bits of wood just to fill it, and then put your path material in, and then you can remove it later on. And of course, if you don't fancy all that bending over, you can go the other way. Use taller raised beds, perhaps grow in planters raised up on legs, or grow in containers. I really love starting off new growing areas. To me, it means more delicious garden-grown organic produce, and that's what motivates us all, right? Now tell me, do you have plans for expanding your vegetable garden, or perhaps you're starting off your very first garden? Tell me all about it in the comments below.
Okay, that was one of the better videos I think that we can use to make our own raised beds. And I think we covered a lot of topics today, and we can actually get boosted and start our own gardening thing now, because pots have been covered and raised bed have been covered. The main two ways of just starting anywhere you want to do, be it on your first floor or in apartments where you want to do, or in your terrace, you can also grow there. And the grounding technique is also there to give you that extra growth that you need. So I hope you enjoyed the lessons today. Tomorrow will be the last lessons, and we will be looking at ways of increasing your shelf life. Like, how do you increase your shelf life of the produce? So we'll be looking at sun drying things, and making into pickles or something, achar as we say it. So all these things we'll try to cover tomorrow, of how to make the best use of your harvest and increase the shelf life of your produce. So let's meet tomorrow again at the same time. And if you have any questions, you can join the group and post the questions there. If you have any queries or questions right now, you can ask me. I'm just here for a couple of minutes for the new joinees, but otherwise, we'll be ending the session now. Thank you very much.